Chapter 4: The Wrong Tools. There is a particular kind of failure that is invisible from the inside. You are trying to open a safe. You have a screwdriver. The screwdriver is a real tool. It works on screws. The problem is not that you have no tool. The problem is that you have the wrong tool, and because you have a tool, you keep using it. You tighten, you probe, you apply force in different directions. The safe does not open. You conclude that safes cannot be opened. You write a philosophical paper about the fundamental inaccessibility of safes. The safe was not inaccessible. You needed a different number. You needed a sequence. This is the situation of every student who approaches the Advaita Vedanta corpus without preparation, not incompetent, not incapable, simply equipped with the wrong instrument for the first operation required. The wrong instrument is ordinary philosophical vocabulary. Here is what ordinary philosophical vocabulary can do. It can state propositions. It can identify contradictions. It can track logical entailments from premise to conclusion. It can compare positions, evaluate arguments, and map conceptual terrain with considerable precision. These are real capacities. They work well in most philosophical contexts. Here is what ordinary philosophical vocabulary cannot do. It cannot perform the Advaita operation. Not because the operation is mystical or beyond analysis, because the operation is a specific technical procedure that requires specific technical instruments, and those instruments are not in ordinary philosophical vocabulary. Consider what you are actually being asked to do when you engage Vivekachudamani, or seriously, with the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. You are being asked to perform a first-person operation, an investigation directed at the investigator, using a set of terms that partition experience in very specific ways. The terms are not decorative. They are surgical. Atman is not a synonym for self, in the way that ordinary language uses self. Brahman is not a synonym for God, or the universe, or ultimate reality, in any sense those phrases carry in Western philosophical discourse. Maya is not a synonym for illusion in the sense of something false or mistaken or not fully real. If you read Atman as self, Brahman as God, and Maya as illusion, you will understand the sentences. They will parse grammatically. They will even seem philosophically interesting. What you will not do is perform the operation the sentences were written to perform. You will be using a screwdriver on a combination lock. Shankara knew this. The entire architecture of the Prakarana Grunta, the introductory treatise category that occupies volumes I and II of the corpus, is his answer to it. The Prakarana Grunta texts are not introductions in the sense of simplified overviews for beginners who will later graduate to the real material. They are precision instruments. They install vocabulary, not vocabulary in the sense of word-meaning pairs you look up in a glossary and then proceed. Vocabulary in the sense of cognitive categories that change what you are able to notice in your own experience when you attend carefully. This distinction is the whole point of Part 2, so let's be precise about it. There is a difference between knowing the definition of a concept and possessing the concept as an operative tool. A medical student can memorize the definition of referred pain experienced at a location distant from its source, without yet having the clinical perception that allows them to identify it in a patient. The definition is correct. The concept is understood missing intellectually, between the but something definition and is the perception. The missing thing is not more information. It is a trained capacity to see differently. The Prakarana Grunta texts train a capacity. The Tattva Bodha, the Awakening of Truth, the first text of the corpus, is 32 short sections. In Sanskrit it fits on perhaps 12 pages. It does not contain Shankara's deepest insights. It does not contain his most powerful arguments. What it contains is a taxonomy, 3 bodies, 5 sheaths, 3 states of consciousness, the distinction between the witness and what is witnessed. The distinction between superimposition, projecting a false identity onto something, and recognition something actually is. Seeing what you read it and you think, fine, a basic map, and you proceed, but you are now carrying the map, and the map changes what you see. The Vivekachudamani, 580 verses of maximum force philosophical argument and direct instruction, asks you to perform the sheath withdrawal exercise, to notice that you are not the food body, they're not the vital body, they're not the mental body, they're not the intellectual body, they're not the bliss body. You can perform this exercise because you have the map. Without the map, the instruction is a list of words. With the map, it is a procedure. You know what food body refers to. You know what withdrawal means in this context. You know where you are in the sequence. The vocabulary lets you do the thing. This is what Shankara built, not a reading list, a surgical preparation. The phase 1 texts, the vocabulary installers, fall into a precise functional sequence. The Tattva Bodha and the Atma Bodha operate at the level of ontological taxonomy. They answer the question, what kinds of things are there? The answer is delivered through the 3-body schema, gross, subtle, causal, and the 5-sheath schema, food, vital, mental, intellectual, bliss. These two schemas are not the same partition. They are two different ways of dividing the same phenomenological territory, each revealing something the other obscures. The 3-body schema is architectural. It shows the structure of the human organism at 3 levels of density. The 5-sheath schema is nested. It shows the same organism as 5 layers around a core, each layer appearing to be me, until attended to with sufficient precision, at which point it reveals itself as an object of awareness rather than awareness itself. The student who has worked through both schemas has acquired a diagnostic grid. They can, in principle, locate any experience, any sensation, thought, mood, intention, or state within the grid and identify what layer it belongs to. This is not yet liberation. It is the preparation without which liberation cannot proceed. The Drg-Drishya Viveka, the Seer-Seen discrimination, advances this preparation by installing the most important operational distinction in the entire corpus. The text is 4 to 6 verses. In the right hands, 46 verses is enough to shift a cognitive location permanently. It performs a single operation in extreme slow motion, the regression to the witness position. Here is what that means in practice. You are reading these words. Something is aware of the reading. That awareness is not itself the words, it is what the words appear in. Now notice, something is aware of the awareness of the reading. Whatever that second-order awareness is, it is not the first-order awareness of the words, it is what first-order awareness appears in. The Drg-Drishya Viveka tracks this regression with surgical care. At each step, the text identifies what is seen, the Drishya, and what is seeing, the Drk. At each step, it demonstrates that the seer at this level becomes the seen at the next. And it asks, where does this regression terminate? What is the seeing that is never seen? The text's answer is precise, the witness, not a thing, not a perspective located somewhere, the irreducible ground of all appearing. The one position that once genuinely occupied does not move. Without the Tattva Bodha's taxonomic grid, the Drg-Drishya Viveka's regression is abstract. With the grid in place, the regression can be performed on the actual contents of experience. This sensation is food body, this thought is mental sheath, this bliss is bliss sheath, until the regression finds its floor. This is vocabulary installation. This is what the Prakarana Grunta texts do. They do not describe the destination. They give you the instruments to navigate toward it. The Vedantasara and the Sadhana Panchakam install the remaining preparatory equipment. The Vedantasara, the essence of Vedanta, is the macrocosm-microcosm map. If the Tattva Bodha told you what kinds of things exist inside the individual human organism, the Vedantasara tells you how the individual human organism fits within the total structure of manifestation. Ishvara, the Lord, the cosmic intelligence that produces and sustains the universe, is the macrocosmic correlate of the individual jiva. The same consciousness that produces the individual mind produces the cosmic mind. The relationship is not metaphorical, it is structural. Understanding this relationship changes what the Mahavakyas, the great sayings of the Upanishads, actually say when they are encountered later. That thou art, tat tivamasi, cannot be performed as an identity operation unless you understand what that and thou refer to in the full technical Vedantasara installs that sense. The Sadhana Panchakam, 40 words of Sanskrit that Shankara somehow compresses 8 disciplines of progressive practice into, is a different kind of installation. It is not taxonomic. It is sequential. It describes not a map but a journey. The 40 steps of the Sadhana Panchakam are in order: what to study, how to study it, what attitudes to cultivate, what habits to correct, what relationship to seek with a teacher, how to practice what the teacher transmits, and what recognition terminates the practice. Reading it before the corpus is reading a compressed itinerary before a long journey. When you arrive at each landmark described in the 40 steps, you know where you are. The knowing where you are is not the landscape, but it is what allows you to proceed without becoming lost. There is an objection that a philosophically careful reader will have been holding for several pages. You have described the Phase 1 texts as installing vocabulary that enables the Phase 2 operations. But you have also said, in Chapter 3, that the master method is adhiropara, provisional attribution followed by withdrawal. If the Phase 1 vocabulary is provisional, if it will be withdrawn in the Phase 5 radical texts, why install it so carefully? Why not acknowledge its provisionality from the beginning and save the reader the work of both installation and removal? The answer to this objection is the most important thing in this chapter. You cannot withdraw a position you never occupied. The adhiropara method requires genuine inhabitation of each provisional position before the withdrawal can work. The student who understands that the three-body schema is provisional before genuinely applying it to their own experience has not performed the adhiropara. They have performed an intellectual maneuver that mimics the adhiropara from the outside. It looks the same from a distance. It produces no recognition. Here is a comparison that will make this concrete. Imagine you are learning to play the piano. You know as a general intellectual matter that the specific piece you are working on this week is a pedagogical exercise, not the musical goal, just scaffolding. Knowing this does not mean you should not practice the exercise. The exercise builds hand coordination, timing, and the specific muscle memory required for the larger piece. Knowing it is provisional does not bypass the function it serves. You have to actually play the scales. The Phase 1 texts are the scales. They build a specific cognitive coordination, the precision of attention required to perform the Phase 2 operations. The recognition that they are provisional scaffolding is correct and important, but it does not replace the function they perform. The student who skips the tattva bodha because they already know it is just a map is the pianist who knows the scales are not the music and therefore does not practice them. They have understood something true and used it to exempt themselves from the work the true thing was meant to initiate. Part 2 proceeds through the Phase 1 texts in functional sequence. Not in the order they were written, Shankara composed them across a lifetime in a sequence that scholars still dispute, but in the order that the cognitive instrument requires them. The next chapter takes the Dhyajidrishya Viveka and performs the regression in full, 46 verses, one operation. Performed here on you now in real time while also being described. You will either find the witness, or you will find the next obstacle with sufficient precision to begin removing it. Both outcomes are progress.